So in this segment, we're going to be talking about these two different clips where Tory MPs just struggle to really defend the impact that Brexit has done to the UK in terms of trade. It's pretty embarrassing at this point, and they just keep going. So let's give this clip a watch.
Let's have a look at this headline in The Independent. More than 40% of British exports have disappeared from European shelves since Brexit. It's based...
And that's a story I've already covered.
On new research from Aston University. Do you accept, Andrew, that Brexit has made it more difficult for businesses to export to goods and services? You are the Exports Minister.
Yeah, look, our exit from the single market and the customs union has obviously changed the relationship between British exporters
and made it more difficult.
But we are determined to resolve
He's stuck in the question.
Situations to make it easier for British exporters to get their goods onto shelves within the European continent. As each day goes past, companies in this country are finding it easier to get their goods into Europe. We're determined to make it even easier than it is
but
right now.
Has it made it harder?
You know, he's saying that as every day goes past, exporters from GB are finding it easier to export to the EU. Like how? Are they just levelling up slowly? Are they just gaining XP day by day like an RPG game? Like, well, what's going on here? This is just a nonsense argument. And then he argues that the Tories are going to make it even easier for people to export to the EU when we're looking at deregulating from the EU, which will make it harder for companies to export to the EU. So, okay, mate.
Has Brexit made it harder?
It's changed the relationship. There's no doubt about that. And of course, it takes time for companies to get to grips with, to understand, and to easily navigate the new rules and the systems that are in place.
Johnson said there would be no non-tariff barriers. So what new systems are in place?
We're in the Department for International Trade committed to actually simplifying the process.
How are you going to make it easier? I mean, because the research also shows a reduction in product varieties being exported to the EU. Isn't that going to hurt businesses if they're producing fewer things because they can't sell them?
Yeah, but we're determined to drive up exports, not just to Europe, but around the world. Look at what we're doing in Australia and New Zealand. Look at the discussions that are going on with the
trade deal that the former DEFRA Minister George Eustace said was a rotten deal, even though he supported Brexit.
Well,
I mean, that's a burn right there, especially because those trade deals benefit Australia and New Zealand way more than they benefit us. Adds much more to their GDP. So, this guy's an absolute plonker.
You won't be surprised to find that I disagree wholeheartedly with George Eustace's prognosis or of the deals that we've done with Australia and New Zealand. They're groundbreaking, especially from...
What ground are they breaking? I genuinely don't get it. They're worse for us. They're so bad. I think the EU's deal with Australia is better than the one we have now. I think the EU recently signed a deal with Australia or New Zealand, one of the two. It's a much better deal for them. The arguments he used are ridiculous, especially when George Eustace was in charge of DEFRA. He knew the impact it's going to have on farming at the time, and that's one of the reasons why he's talking about how bad a deal it is.
Many areas of the UK economy that are growing, financial services just being one.
Financial services are shrinking. I don't know what he's talking about. Overall, financial services are doing way worse than they were in years gone by because of Brexit. The argument he makes is ridiculous.
Of them.
You want to increase exports to the EU
Yes.
from where we are now. How are you going to do it?
Various ways. We're in the middle of discussions. We've got a target of getting the UK up to £1 trillion of exports. Of course, Europe is a major market for British goods.
Sure.
They want to buy our stuff, and we're working hard across the board to simplify the process by which British companies get their goods into Europe.
Right.
How are you going to simplify? How can the UK unilaterally simplify that process of UK exports to GB to EU? We can't. We're expecting the EU to do that. It makes no sense what he's arguing here. Genuinely, I'm just baffled.
But imagine, I know nothing about this, and actually I don't know anything about how businesses trade. How do you do it?
We're going to simplify the customs process. That's going to mean engaging with various countries across the European Union, and of course...
It's going to mean engaging with the Commission, pal. That's what it's going to mean. You're not going to be engaging with individual countries. You'll be engaging with the Commission to sort that out, not France and Germany, for example.
Making it a simpler process to do all the paperwork, the new paperwork.
Are you hoping to do that individually with countries in the EU rather than doing it with the EU as a whole?
There will be a variety of discussions that are ongoing between the UK and the EU as a whole and individual countries.
Are they receptive to that?
Pardon?
Are they receptive to that?
Yes, of course they are. They want to buy British stuff. We want to sell them our stuff, and we're going to.
Oh my God, so we've gone from a guy who claims the relationship is different, but somehow, because the EU want to buy our stuff and we want to sell them our stuff, things are going to magically happen. Jeez, my guy must think he's Luka Modric or something, or the Dark Magician. But now we cut to a clip of this guy saying, no, Brexit hasn't had an impact.
no benefits to economic growth, because as you are saying, even the OBR, the Office for Budget Responsibility, says the economy is going to be 4% smaller than if we were in the...
And I exactly accept that. But if you're hoping to be Prime Minister after the next election, you have to be realistic about what you can deliver. And the idea that any government after the next election could suddenly turn around to Europe and say, oh, we're terribly sorry, we've made a terrible mistake, we'd like to rejoin the single market. I mean, after the way they've been treated by Boris Johnson, the complete destruction of trust, the destruction of our good relations, that is what Keir Starmer's going to have to focus on doing, rebuilding our relations with our most important trading partner, show the benefits of that, and then who knows what might happen in 10, 20 years' time.
Henry?
I mean, 10 or 20 years' time, I'll be well, a lot older than I am now, that's for sure. But yeah, he's right. Starmer does have to rebuild relations with the EU. I don't think he's going about it necessarily the right way. But talking about rejoining the single market, it just won't happen. That's the problem. It's just not going to happen. We've spoken about it ad nauseum.
Well, I think this is somewhat of a false argument. The reason why there is economic stagnation and recession isn't to do with Brexit. We're seeing it around the world, whether it's in Japan, whether it's in the United States, whether it's in the single market. It's
worse here, and I would, if I was this guy, I'd be mentioning the fact that the UK is doing the worst out of all the G7 members. So, clearly something is wrong here. Our growth is 0.4% lower than Germany's at the moment. And the simple fact is, Germany's far more exposed to the war in Ukraine, which is something I have to keep repeating because these people still aren't listening.
The economic indicators around the world are definitely on a downward trajectory, and that is a direct result of two things. It's a result of COVID, and it's a result of...
Bro, we're going to be in a recession, I think, a year longer than EU economies, the G7 countries, the Eurozone. How do you explain this stuff to people who are genuinely so dense that they just won't get it? I genuinely would... If someone told me that guy's head is full of metal and there's no brain there, I would actually believe him. And maybe that goes for the average Brexiteer, because it's coming to that point where in Simpsons there's a meme where they go say the line Bart, and Bart says the catchphrase. I can't remember what it was. That's kind of what's going for Brexiteers. It's has Brexit had an impact on the economies? No, it's the war in Ukraine and the pandemic. That's what's happening. It's say the line Brexiteers. It's just sad. They just can't acknowledge it. But the funny thing is, this guy, Tory MP. He's saying the reason is due to global factors, but you got this guy, a trade minister, saying, well, the relationship has changed and that the UK is trying to get a better relationship with the EU through some sort of magic, so the dark arts perhaps, but they can't agree on what the situation is with the EU in terms of trading relationships and in terms of impacts on the economy. So I'm just baffled at these people. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, support the channel on Patreon if you can, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.